Guys, I'm so excited right now. I feel like I'm shaking. There's a lot that I want to talk to you guys about, especially about the future of Final Fantasy XIV. And this Friday, we're going to be covering it live. I'll be a little bit late to the program, but just note, I think there's going to be some really exciting stuff this weekend to talk about, especially for the future. Before we kind of dive into kind of the core of this video, also thanks to everybody who encouraged me and so was really excited and wants to know more about what it was like to do stand-up. I posted over on Ginger Pine Vlog. That link will be in the description if you want to go check out that experience. I talk about it real in detail, what happened, and I'm looking forward to going back again. Also, Chris and I did a full deep dive of the Reddit post of the Q&A from the FanFest, where you can get so much more information over on Work to Game this morning. So that's up as well. Lots of stuff for you guys today. Happy Monday. But I want to cue in to a couple of ideas that is posted in that post. And this is my pure speculation. This is my experience of what I've been feeling with the game. So a lot of this is rooted in feelings, but as a 13-year veteran of Final Fantasy XIV, there's a lot that builds up on this. This isn't just like on its own, it could just be considered a one-off, but off the language that Yoshi-P's been using for a while now, I think there's some really exciting stuff, especially for those who want Final Fantasy XIV to adopt a more MMO-like culture and more MMO-like gameplay. And before I lose the crowd that's like, Final Fantasy XIV is an MMO, dadgum you, Brian, note that I define Final Fantasy XIV as a Final Fantasy game that sits on top of an MMO. And as a Final Fantasy XI veteran, I would counter, no, it's more like a WoW theme park clone. And this isn't to insult the game by any means. It's just to say and restate what Yoshi-P himself has stated. So you can disagree with me, but you're disagreeing with Yoshi-P, and that's the reality of it. But what does this really mean? So if you look at two key areas within the document, you got a couple things. First, he talks about the hunts and how he doesn't want the system to announce certain things because he feels like that should be information related to the players because that's a feature of an MMO. Also, he talks about the idea of bringing what we have in Bozja with these various like critical engagements and like, solo fights and those kind of world boss fights into the world and saying that would be a really nice MMO feature, right? And where I'm getting at is that obviously we're going to have more information, concrete, more, maybe it's, we don't have dates or anything, but that as we talk about the next 10 years and as we look at what Final Fantasy XIV has done, it has built this incredible Final Fantasy game. It talks about how like maybe we're getting trusts or they're doing something with like they've stopped squadrons specifically because they want to do something more with trusts. We're going to have more information on that. And so I think that's going to be really strong to see that you could actually maybe, in theory, play Final Fantasy XIV without any struggles or interruptions. You could just play it if you want to play that single player story expansion. But a lot of us, and I'm speaking as a Final Fantasy XI veteran, I'm speaking as somebody who really connects into New World in ways that go against the mass of thought. And that's perfectly fine, but there's aspects of this social nature of this. You're not the hero, you're just here. The world in and of itself is the character, is the story, and you're a part of that. And you're not the one, you are the one of many, many, many. And that's where MMO and, the modern theme park MMO kind of conflict. So we start to see systems built around. This, I think, is all building off of the age of WoW, what I call the second age of the MMORPG. And as we transition into a third age of the MMO, which in my mind I see as the golden age, where we start to see more investment in the genre itself, more players maybe returning or starting the game for the genre for the first time, that everything kind of becomes, hey, let's test things out. And I think Yoshi-P, based off of what he said in the past, how he didn't get to build the MMO that he wanted to build. He had to build the MMO that he needed to build. And that's been complete. If you think about Endwalker being this chapter marker, this saga marker, what would Yoshi-P want to do? And I think we've seen hints of that within Eureka and within Bozja. And so the question is that do I think we'll see not like a complete shift? I don't think you're going to end up playing like this incredible saga. Hey, I finished Endwalker. I can't wait for more. And then all of a sudden it's like, wait, this is completely different. Anything's possible right now, but I think within the context of Final Fantasy, whether they decide to put a number next to it, whether they decide to drop the number and say online, whether they keep it with 14 and who knows what's going to happen in the next couple years, whatever they decide to do, I think essentially what we're going to see is more social style systems. And this comes from Yoshi-P saying they want to redo the friends list. There's a lot of little systems that they really want to rewrite and redo. We also have the Final Fantasy XI 20th anniversary this year, and that gives them so much to flex on and to play around with that we'll have to see, because my whole thing has been for the longest time is that Square Enix in and of itself has actually positioned itself incredibly well if they elevated Final Fantasy XI for the players who really want that style. Ultimately, when you see friction within, I think, the genre comes down to a couple key aspects. You have people who want that sandbox. You need people to do content, and then you have the people like, and I fall into both categories, but you're like, yes, people are great, but when I get off work, like, I don't want to spend 2 hours trying to get a group together. I want to just play. And imagine if ultimately you had the best of both worlds. And that's usually where it comes down to, will we see a one subscription, one friends list mindset? Imagine if they connected 11 and 14 in unique ways that you could technically be waiting and forming your party in 11 at the same time while you're doing dungeons and matchmaking in 14. Now, obviously this is speculative. Obviously we don't specifically know. So that's actually one of the things is like, I'd love to know what you personally would love to see. For me, anything that they can do to reinvigorate the open world. I think Square Enix and 14 masterfully have done these zones well. But when I look at what Guild Wars 2 does versus Final Fantasy in terms of its open world, when I look at, New World and its open world, I think that's one of the key aspects that Final Fantasy 14 has struggled with. And if they were able to bring in these type of systems into just the core game, I think that would be really thrilling to see, because it incentivizes people to kind of go out about getting out of Limsa, getting out of Ul'dah, getting out of the city while you're waiting for your queue to pop, and going and participating in this kind of content. I think that could be really exciting to see. I think it's going to be hard to implement. One of the things I'll continue to say is that if they ever do something like that, if they ever bring content that they've made in a future expansion backwards, that's a love letter to the community, because as a developer, that's so much more difficult to do than it would be to design it on the ground level forward. That's why we've seen new systems come into play in an expansion, and it exists in that expansion forward. It doesn't exist previously, because those are actually, like, while you think of it as expansion A, expansion B as a unified experience, really in reality, from a coding perspective, the fates in A Realm Reborn aren't the same as the fates in, Shadowbringers or Endwalker. And the reason is because, like, while they're labeled fate, they could be in the code something completely different. And really that's what's happening, just so it can protect the integrity of the previous system, and you don't compromise, you don't end up having issues you introduce to new players or instability and things of that nature. Really quite smart to do it that way, especially with the timeline and how they structure their content. So that's what I'm queuing off of here. MMO-like, more of that in this game. That's what I want. That's what I want for Final Fantasy XIV. Not at the exclusion of players who don't, but I want more MMO that Final Fantasy sits on top of. And hopefully we'll see what that looks like and what that could look like, obviously, here. And we'll hopefully get a real good picture of what that looks like this Friday. So I'll try to schedule that stream. Again, I'm going to be running late, so I'm going to actually be coming into probably some awesome information. Regardless, I'm excited to experience it with you guys. If you have any questions, you got your own thoughts, feel free to sound off below. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I want to sit down, kind of just put this out there into the world, and hope you guys have a fantastic day. Until next time, take care.
Yeah. It's time to chill out on the couch and read some comments. That's right. You know me when it comes to Destiny. I'm off with a clan, and I'm glad you're feeling better. Oh.